Welcome back, my friends, to another free write as we are now officially in 2025. Today is going to be short and simple. Like all y'all know, I am in the process of moving my life. So these streams this week are going to be the time a little all over the place, and the writing. I'm getting into Act 2 of Last Scarecrow. Where are you at in the writing process? So I know we've been doing a lot of goal setting, talking about, okay, this is what I'm writing and working on for 2025. But where in the storytelling process are you? Are you in draft 1, draft 2, draft 3? I would love to hear how far along you're at, so that way we can go on this journey together. Feel free to drop a comment. I would love to hear from you. Welcome to the Right Now community. I'm Kaufman. I'm on a mission to help the writers of the world with the writing process. So come join because we're starting right now. All right, my friends. So today's going to be a little brief. Due to my moving schedule, I will do this for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to be little shorter this today. After 366 days, where I feel like I've been pretty good. I've actually been pretty good about making sure the streams are at least an hour, and then usually going into the 2+ hour mark on average. So once again, this is a little bit of a shorter week for me. Now I'm going to get straight into it, and I'll throw up some music if you want to come join and write with me. Awesome. I was like, I guess I should probably throw up the Z banners. That would probably help. Let's go our writing banners. Perfect. There's that. And then we'll also throw up copyrights. All right, beautiful. So you guys can see from my screen, I have my stuff all set. So as I'm getting into the second act of my story of Last Scarecrow, you can see that I have my table of contents set up. I am going into chapter 10. So I wrapped Act 1, which I want to say Act 1 ended with Trial by Fire. Interesting. Okay, so I just need to clarify that the end of Act 1, 89 to 105. All right, so let me pull up Scarecrow, make sure, let's see, we'll go like this. Perfect, and I'll see. All right, wonderful. So let's see what we got. So I think chapter 10, and I got to go over here, chapter 10. All right, so it looks like Last Scarecrow plummeted. Okay, so last I left off Scarecrow, would he still be alive? Shaking his head. All right, I just have to let me refresh myself, right? So the end of chapter 9. Cried as he spun around. Okay. All right. So chapter 10. Okay. So I would say chapter 10 is end of Act 1. Yes, that makes sense because this is the introduction of who I had added in the second draft, the Tin Wizard, who is our last robot character. Let's see. And I know I had finished this chapter, I believed. Yep, because I had forced myself to wrap up. All right, and we had gone into the Silent Scream. Okay, yes. So, chapter. Perfect. So, that was end of Act 1. Wonderful. Okay. So, you guys can see just from like an outlining perspective kind of what I'm doing here. So, I just wanted to make this a little clearer for myself. Act 1 is chapters 1 through 10. Just do that, and this is just for myself. So, all right, so Act 1 is chapters 1 through 10. CH1 through 10. Perfect. All right, and I was like, I don't think I need to bold that. Wonderful. And we will outline, underline. All right, and that's just for my own needs. Okay, so now going into Act 2. All right, so then this is going to be Act 2. Nope. Which right now, Act 2 is Now, okay, so I guess this depends if I do decide to break up Act Two, if I decide to break it up into a 4-act structure instead of 3 acts, which I'm considering because when I think about the flow, when I think about the flow state of the book, Act Two is technically broken up where we have the midpoint, which is really the middle of the book, which is a low point for the characters and the journey that the characters go on. So in the first half act, when the first half of Act Two, so you guys can kind of hear how I'm thinking through this. Why would I split up my story into a 4-act structure? Act One introduces the protagonist. It introduces Scarecrow. It introduces Mr. Crow and this world, this post-apocalyptic world where nature is out of whack. There's a lot of destruction and decay, and something is wrong with the elements. Something is wrong with the moon and the sun. Just a lot of like very like isolated places that Scarecrow is going through. When he finally catches up to Mr. Crow, he is reached out to telepathically by the Tin Wizard, who they go through New City. They go through this whole New City arc, which is a couple of chapters to find Tin Wizard. Scarecrow gets separated with Crow, and when Scarecrow finally reaches the Tin Wizard after having met a number of crazy characters in New City, which is the ruins of a city, he encounters Hand and Foot, which are basically as they are. It's a hand and a foot, and the hand has a personality. He encounters Mr. Quilt, which I've renamed to Quilt, who is basically a flying magic carpet. He encounters these characters as he travels to find the Tin Wizard. He finally gets to the Tin Wizard, and the Tin Wizard is basically in ruins and in decay, and introduces himself to be the last robot who apologizes. We get some backstory and understanding why he called Scarecrow to him. And he said that he is now going to explain why Scarecrow is the only one that is able to do what needs to be done to save the world. I think basically to deal with the last demon, the first demon, which is the first time the demon's actually referenced. But I've already done some foreshadowing in some of the chapters for the first demon's influence. So that's Act One. Act Two takes the characters on a journey. So Act Two takes the characters more on the first half of Act Two, I would say, is a little bit more lighthearted-ish in a sense of this world, right? So it's very odd. We get some very, very odd adventures. But it's more overall, it's more lighthearted in the nature, but what happens to them, I wouldn't say is lighthearted. We have Scarecrow and Mr. Crow set out. They come into contact and meet up with the third member of their party, Pebble the Pixie, and they continue on their adventures through a series of obstacles, which they go through the garden. There's a bunch of mind controlling plants. They get caught and trapped in the forest, which is basically an inventor creating a lot of Frankenstein type creations. And then they get lost. They get stuck in a swamp, which is a lake of what I call muck, which basically just puts them into a dream state, which they have to work together to get out. They escape that, and then they run into, in the first draft, I didn't have them meet Gore until they were captured. I think I'm going to have them meet Gore after this. Gore is their fourth party member. I want to make his introduction a little bit more prominent. Yeah, I do want to make his introduction a little bit more prominent. And then they get captured by the primates. The primates end up capturing Scarecrow and Gore, and end up taking them to the Coliseum Arc. Pixie and so Pebble and Mr. Crow find other groups that they connect with. Let's see. Pebble runs into a group of Dragonkin. Mr. Crow runs into a group of other animals, which is Audie, the otter, the skunk, and some squirrels, as they all travel to the Coliseum Arc. That leads them to the Colosseum, which is a whole fight for the death. That's a lot happens. And that leads us to a terrible, terrible midpoint where a lot of things happen and something really, really bad happens. I won't spoil that for anybody who has not experienced that part of the story so far. The midpoint is a low point for the characters. That's also when the first demon's influence is introduced. So, or that's when the first demon becomes much more notable at the midpoint, which I love. I think is intentional. So the first half of Act 2 is they're getting stuck in these different adventures. Act 3, which was originally the second half of Act 2, I think is much more intentional with the characters. I think Act 2 is much more intentional. And even as I'm like looking at my notes, right? So I'm looking at my outline here. So most of these chapters are Act 2 chapters. Let's see. Yep, dealing with the primates, the Tiger King, the Colosseum arc. The midpoint is, of course, the nothingness. We finally get to see what the nothingness is at the midpoint, and it's terrifying. But as I think about it, Act 2, the characters are kind of wandering aimlessly in a sense. They know where they need to go, but they don't know where it is. Act 3, which I think I'm going to break up, which is the midpoint originally, which was the back end of half 2, which is now the midpoint to which was second in the back, originally the back end of Act 2. Originally, I think I'm going to turn that into Act 3 because the tone of it is different. I think it's much darker. The characters have experienced a profound loss, and I think they also go immediately into a darker environment, which they did not. Previously, they were in a lighter environment, but the creatures and the things in the environment was dark. So I actually think it does make sense. I think it does make sense of Act 3 because there's just the world state kind of changes where they travel through. And that basically takes them all the way through the Darklands into the Eastern Monuments, dealing with the hags at the nest, Scarecrow going through a lot of hardships and journeys, and then they end up at the Graveyard of the Last. The graveyard is the place that they've been trying to go to. The events at the graveyard culminate in some really bad things happening to our heroes. And Scarecrow is left at an all-time low point. Yeah, Scarecrow says left at an all-time low point, and then that's when the original transition was into Act 3. I think I will then make that Act 4, which is then when we start going in the direction of the end of the story or the climax of the world, which is dealing with the realm of the first demon, which I love how I set it up. I know there has to be I have to do some detailing and refining and some of the logistics, but I'm very happy with that. So I think that actually makes sense. Okay. So that actually helped me talking it out. I know I saw a couple of you guys hop into the stream. Rachel, glad I was able to see you hop in. Hey, I'm capturing some quotes to put in my Facebook group from one of my characters, but then I'll be going down my to-do list. You're like, woo! Right, then I'll be going down my to-do list. It sounds like a great strategy. You're like, how many chapters in Act 2? Yes, I hope that answered your question, Lynn. Let's see. So Act 2, how many chapters? So I think that's what I was trying to figure out. So I know I just talked through the story. Anybody who's not familiar with the world, they're like, okay, you might understand like parts of it. But how many chapters? So I think if I break this up into a 4-act structure, and I would love your guys' feedback, right? If you guys think like, does a 4-act structure make more sense? Because usually Act 2, like it's the beats are broken up before the midpoint and then after the midpoint. But I think I really think I like breaking up into 4 acts. And then I'm highly considering that in the book itself, I'm going to actually list them as like, I might list each of the acts as like either part 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe I might name them something, but essentially part 1, 2, 3, 4, or act 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see, how many chapters will I say in Act 2? Midpoint. So I would say here, yeah, because this is really the midpoint here. So I would say 28. So Act 2 is 11 to 28. 11, 21. All right, so that gives us about 18 chapters. So this is about 18 chapters. I'll just put 18 chapters. All right, so this is 18 chapters in Act 2. Act 1 has what? 10? So let's do 10 chapters. All right, and then I think now if I break this up now is if I do the Act 3, and I'm my gut's telling me that that's the right thing to do because normally like you don't. Act 2 usually has the front end and the back end because tonally a lot of the world state is the same, right? Usually things just get worse after the midpoint, but I think it makes sense for me because the world state that they're traveling through, not only do the stakes get worse, but I think the world state gets worse as well. So tonally, the second half of Act 2 just feels different, which is I think why it would make sense for me to break up Act 2 and 3. So let's see. Act 3 would then be, let's see. So Act 3, 29. Just going to take them. The last tree. So this would be 41. All right. So let's see. All right. So I would say that is 13 chapters in Act 3 then. And then let's see, Act 4. Would be chapters 42 to and I think that's a epilogue. So technically 42 to 55. Remember, prologue, epilogue, technically not part of the story. A prologue and or an epilogue is either before the narrative or after the narrative, and usually does something that's either setting up for the world. In fantasy, it's usually world building, or it's plot development, or it's plot foreshadowing for future novels. So 42 through 55. Let's see. Yeah, so 13 as well, which I think that actually does work. All right. Granted, you guys know that I do have to cut some stuff for my story, so we'll see how this goes. I know right now my word count is the manuscript word count is getting close to 150,000. Oy vey. Oh god. Sarah, that's good that you're trying to get some editing work in yourself, my friend. Hopefully it goes well. Good luck. Fingers crossed that it works out for you. Jenny, it looks like you're doing some cool stuff on your own. Like, hi everyone, I'm splitting time between two projects. Main project is a rom-com I'm co-writing, and the second is my romantasy, which is on its first rough draft. That's actually kind of cool. I mean, usually I personally try not to split projects because then I get too distracted. But I know so many writers out there who they're able to do it really successfully. Romantasy is also very popular, so I'm not surprised. It's actually cool. I'm curious to know it. Yeah, the romantasy sounds like a lot of fun though. Okay. So now breaking up the story into a 4-act structure, that means in terms of a chapter count, Act 1, and I'm just going to put this here as a note for myself. Act 1 is 10 chapters. Act 2 is 18 chapters. Act 3 is, I think I said 13. 18, 13 chapters. Yeah, and then Act is also 13 chapters. So when I look at this and I ask myself, where do I need to cut from if I want to bring the words down? I think it's pretty obvious which chapter, which act I could probably bring down, because the events of Act 2 are technically the least consequential to the protagonist's journey. I just got to figure out where to cut. Yeah, God, that's going to be a hard one. It's like, okay, I could either cut an entire arc, but that might make the journey feel shorter, which means then I probably need to cut some transitionary chapters. So it's kind of I'm going back and forth. Like I know Act 2 is where I need to cut from if I want to bring down my word count goal. I'm just not sure where. I'll have to make the determination as I'm reading. You're like, Rachel, okay, added the questions and excerpt to the Facebook group and touch base with a friend. I have a new blurb to work on next. That's good. Getting some stuff done. I was like, that's the goal. I try to be accomplished today. Looks like you've got plenty of writing to work with. That word count tells me you might be able to pull something into novella or short story. Yeah, I mean that is a possibility, right? So like let's say I cut a couple of chapters, then where do I put the material that gets cut? Couple of different things, right? I can make it a reader magnet. I could turn it into a novella and make it a reader magnet or a short story. Or I could save the material for future books. I think those are like the two options. Yeah, Rachel, keep in mind most Act 2s are going to be a bit larger than the rest. I completely agree. And I think generally in a 3-act structure, Act 2 is generally the largest. But I think because I decided to break Act 2 up into Act 2 and 3, granted, I'm fine with Act 2 being longer, but I think it's just like, okay, if I do need to cut some from somewhere, I think this is where the cutting needs to happen. Because Act 3 is where stakes are getting worse. Chappers. Yeah, guys, it's gonna be hard. Just not that much larger. As a fellow overwriter, I get it. I know, right? It's the challenge of this. The challenge of the second draft is like where to cut from. Oh man. All right. And so I think I'm getting some good planning and some good goal setting on my end. All right. Let's see. Now let me go into this. I accomplished all that. So let me go characters and set up what I need to do for this edit. All right. So I want to say that in this one, so in chapter 11, which is where I'm about to embark into, let's see. It looks like I left a note. Change chapter title. Okay. Yep. All right. So I did change the chapter title. I'm glad I got that worked out. All right. So originally I called this Quest for the Last Monarch. I changed that because I went in a different direction. Quest of the Last Creator. Do I want the not sure if I like that or not, but we'll just go with that for now. Quest for the Last Creator. I'm wondering if I should do something that's named after the antagonist. I'm just wondering if I use the antagonist name later on. Yeah, it's like I don't think. Because I think that the point of this chapter is really giving me backstory about our antagonist and why Scarecrow needs to now go on a journey to deal with the first demon. So I think I could quest for the last creator or quest quest for the first demon, quest for the last creator. The last quest, we could go the first demon. We could just go that. I could just name it after that. Chapter 11, the first demon, as compared to quest of the last creator. It could go either way. I need to go through the chapter and see how I feel about it. Okay, so who do I have? I obviously have Scarecrow, for the last robot. And I know a lot of this was backstory. And I think I had the betrayer. Okay. So right now he's called the man in the brown trench coat is just called the betrayer right now. So Scarecrow, the last robot, and the betrayer. And then we have the council. All right. So the council is just a minimal, there are minimal rules in this backstory. Okay. So we have the all right. So we have the council, which is female in golden white fur. Let's see. I have to remember what I named all of them because I think I only had them in this chapter, which I think I'm fine with leaving them. I think it insinuates, I think having a council insinuates that there was a society and that there was structure, which I think is actually important during this time period. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's been so long since I worked on this. This is awesome. Let's see. Standing was a tall man in a brown trench coat. All right. So then we have female in golden white fur, leader in wolf / bear hides. And a tall blonde female covered in golden white fur, along with a small round creator draped in materials from their structures. Okay, so then we have a small, male in armor. Okay, so I have those three, and then we have, of course, the first demon. We have baby first demon. We'll just call baby first demon. Okay, cool. Yeah, so actually this chapter's not even super long either. Okay. So then I'm asking myself, what do I have to change? What are my goals for it? So I think for my second draft goals, I think this chapter is actually in a pretty good place. I think this is just going to be reviewing. I think this is just going to be more minor editing and clarifying certain world building details. but I mean, I and then I just have to make sure ensure that the quest is clearly stated. Let's see, is there any foreshadowing elements I want to layer upon? Um, I want to layer on foreshadowing element for the betrayer character. Foreshadowing element for the betrayer. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I like that. I think I like the direction that I want to take it in. I feel pretty good about where I need to go next. Yeah, because 11 is stating the quest, and then 12 is when we start going on the journey. And then I get to introduce Pebble, which was really like the beginning of the fun and game section, and chapter 13. This is when I get my pixie. Get my pixie soon. Oh, I have missed my pixie. Okay, so I'm in. I feel pretty good. That was some solid planning on my part. I think I am pretty happy with what I've accomplished today. I kind of needed to talk through it more so to myself to be able to make sure that what I'm doing makes sense. But I think that's all that I'm going to be doing today for the live stream. I have to get on to my other commitments, but I'll be back tomorrow with another live stream, another writing stream. I'll probably continue on and actually start continue on editing and reviewing. I know today's stream is a little shorter than usual, but once again, packing. So that is all that I got for you, my friends. But unfortunately, that brings us to the end of the stream. Don't forget, words are wind, but stories are forever. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the morrow. Stay creative, riders.